Good afternoon, my name is Anna.Pavlova, and today we'll talk with you about understanding your own value and self-confidence. In old times, wisdom was passed through stories and fairy tales, and it worked much better than any advice, instructions and recommendations. So I won't give you any recommendations today. I will read you a fairy tale and you will have space for your own thoughts and conclusions. So relax, listen and enjoy. Hole from the Bagel by Eugene Kluev. One most pretty bagel suddenly began to feel shy of the hole in his stomach. And let the one who thinks that this can't happen not think that this doesn't happen. In fact, this is very often the case. For example, a wonderful, freckled man lives happily, and suddenly, on one of the most common days, he begins to feel embarrassed about his freckles. And no matter how many times you tell him that his freckles are so nice and fit him perfectly, he just feels shy and that's it. Exactly this happened with the bagel. One day he looked at himself intently, and for the first time he saw that he had a hole in his stomach. "Oh, I have a hole in my stomach," he said with a great amazement. And after saying this, he embarrassed and tried to cover this hole with something. But how could he do this? The hole was almost bigger than the bagel himself. "How have I lived with such a hole all the time?" Bagel was puzzled. "It's so noticeable." "Of course noticeable." He heard beside him and realized that he was speaking aloud. But a dish, which standing near, answered him. "If I were you," she went on, "I would immediately go somewhere out of sight. And the problem, by the way, is not that you have a hole in your stomach." "What's the problem then?" Bagel became even more puzzled. However, even before he was already quite puzzled. "The thing is," answered Butterdish patiently, "it's a hole that is not filled with anything. The hole itself is not a real problem. Anyone may have a hole in the belly. For example, I also have a hole, but it is filled with butter, which will be eaten. In you, in fact, there is nothing. You consist almost from this hole, and nobody could eat holes." "Well, let's see." Bagel disagreed. He thought that it was already too much. "There is a dough in me with poppy seeds." "Only so little that it's nothing worth talking about," said Butterdish relentlessly. "Bite off a piece from you and immediately you fall into the abyss, into your hole. Who will like it? The other case is plum bun. There is a lot to bite off, and there is a place to put butter on. As for you, it's impossible to understand how to approach you. Wherever one looks, there is one solid hole. You are even worse than cheese, which, well, it would seem that nothing could be worse than cheese. There are also holes in cheese, but at least not such kind of holes, not so huge as in you, and not so deep, and still your hole go all the way through you." "What's true is true," agreed Bagel this time. "There is the indecently big hole in me, and it goes completely through me. You can even look in me like a telescope." He paused and asked Butterdish, "So you think that I will not be eaten?" "Of course nobody will eat you," laughed Butterdish. "Also, I tell you, people eat everything. I even heard that in China, for example, they eat rats, fry them and eat. Of course, they eat with disgust. And you will be eaten with disgust if at all somebody wants to eat you. Because to eat you is the same as to catch empty air with a mouth." After these words, Bagel was completely upset, and from his grief he decided the following. He puffed up and rolled behind the kettle which was on the table. It was warm and lonely behind the kettle, and the edge of the table was very close. "I'll throw myself now from the table to the abyss," Bagel began, "and that's the end of everything. And I do not even say goodbye to anyone. And there is no one to say goodbye to. Who needs me? Who I am? It's like catching empty air with a mouth." Meanwhile, it was noisy at the table, and Bagel decided not to rush off the table to the abyss, but to see what was happening there. And there was excitement near the table. Everyone was looking for a bagel. "Well," someone was saying, "there must be a bagel somewhere. I bought it in a bakery myself and put it on the table myself. How and where could it disappear?" The dog was urgently called from the garden. They held an interrogation to the dog, whether it ate the only bagel by accident or not. The dog swore and swore that it hasn't seen the bagel, and then the dog was greatly offended and went into the garden, where it even lay down on the ground with its back to the house. That's how the dog was offended and felt hurt. Bagel had no choice but to roll out unnoticed from behind the kettle. That's where they found him. They were delighted and began to eat it with pleasure. The bagel was so happy, as if it was his birthday today. And then, when quite a bit of tasty dough was left, the bagel even managed to hear such an extremely pleasant conversation. "Oh, how I love these bagels!" "For what? There is only air inside. The same air is around." "It's not like the one around, but the other one. This air is warm and fragrant, smelling of field, oven, fresh baking, and poppy. The most delicious air in the world. You can't find such air anywhere else, except inside a ruddy bagel. Next you'll tell us that the most delicious in a bagel is a bagel whole." And that's exactly what I say.